the one and only Matt Matera, my friend from Pewter Report. What's up, Matty4_Matera? How are you?
I'm doing great, Jay. Thank you so much for having me on the show. And I'm even more fired up here when you talk about college football and college basketball and some of these great matchups that we saw and that we're going to see moving forward. So thanks again for having me on.
Yeah, man. Of course, man. It's always a pleasure. Matty Diamonds, Jake Cobian's calling me. I love it. I love it, man. Yeah, and listen, it was kind of great because I drove out to JFK yesterday. I left my parents' house. I've been under the weather for the last couple of days, but I'm watching this Bucks game against the Panthers, and we're watching on the way to the airport, going through security. I go through security, and right before I put my phone down, Adam Thielen scores the touchdown to put the
Oh,
Carolina
my
Panthers
goodness.
ahead. When I get through security, the game's in overtime. So I'm like, I don't know how they got I don't know how they drove down the field. I eventually went back and watched it. But to me, Matt, I think there's a lot of people on this Monday looking at this Buccaneers game and going, I can't believe they did this. They should have done this. They could have done this. I would have done this. I'm looking at it as, hey, you're not always going to have your A game. A lesser Buccaneers team would have lost that game to Carolina. And at the end of the day, a win is a win. Where do you fall?
Yeah, I always like to go back to what Bruce Arians used to say when he was the Bucs head coach, where he's like, you could still learn a lot with a win. And it's better to learn a lot with the win than trying to figure out what went wrong with the loss. So I understand the frustration because there are a lot of things that you could point to that maybe doesn't show that the Bucs are, a Super Bowl contender, even if they get into the playoffs. But on the same side of it, yes, we've seen situations where the Bucs have played lights out and then still found a way to lose, like whether it was the Dirk Cutter days or the late Jameis Winston days as well. So I think you just gotta, we are in the season of thanks and the holiday season. I think you gotta be thankful that you found a way to win and keep your playoff hopes alive, because they would have squandered a fantastic game from Bucky Irving and the Falcons losing to the Chargers. That would have all went away, but thankfully they somehow pulled out a win.
Back to the Bucks in a second. Let's go to the Falcons since you just mentioned them. I was not, and this isn't bias, this isn't hating. I really question when people are crowning teams in the offseason because of what they did in free agency, right? And everybody, there was people talking about the Falcons like they were fringe Super Bowl contenders. And I'm going, you got Judon coming off of a season-ending injury, got Kirk Cousins at his advanced age coming off of a season-ending injury. All right, they bring in Simmons, but I was like, that's kind of redundant because you're bringing in arguably another player at the position of your best player on your team in Jesse Bates. And now you look at Cousins throwing 4 interceptions. The pass rush doesn't look any better. I mean, what do you make of the Atlanta Falcons? I always thought all year long that they were fugazi. Oh, yeah, Kyle Pitts had as many catches as you and I did yesterday, Matty4.
Yeah.
What do you make of the Falcons? Do you think they can turn this thing around? Because when you look at their schedule compared to the Buccaneers schedule, Bucks is a lot easier than theirs.
I mean, did we not learn our lesson from the year before when the Saints signed Derek Carr? And it was like, oh my God, the Saints are going to be fantastic. No, like we saw this play out. Now, are the Falcons a better team with Kirk Cousins than Desmond Ridder? Yeah, of course, obviously. But we're also talking about, you want to talk about injuries, Kirk Cousins coming off an Achilles injury, a guy that has never played his best in the brightest of moments and the brightest of lights. He's not known for really being clutch. His biggest win was against the Bucs. That you like that game several years ago when the Bucs were terrible. So to see Kirk Cousins play pedestrian and average against everybody but the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, it's not exactly shocking. Now, I still do think that the Falcons are a solid team and could end up winning the NFC South based on, the issues that the Bucs have with themselves as a team. But yeah, you mentioned it. The Falcons play Minnesota. That ain't going to be easy. And they also play the Commanders mixed in with a couple of other easier teams. So I think the Falcons can still be a playoff team. That matchup against the Commanders coming up in a couple of weeks will be really big. I don't think the door is closed on them, but they are clearly not the team that many of us expected to be.
A 3-game losing streak. And you look at this team and you look at their weapons on the outside. Again, Kyle Pitts, 0 catches for 0 yards, 2 targets in the game yesterday. Let me guess how many sacks they have. Oh, they actually had, 5 sacks yesterday? Is that right? Wow, 5 sacks yesterday. What brought up their total on the season to 15, Matt? They had 10 sacks going into their 12th game yesterday, and people were telling me that this pass rush is automatically incredible. I'm like, I just don't see it. I know that they have the tiebreaker over the Buccaneers because they won the 2 regular season games, but I have a lot more faith in the Buccaneers down the stretch than I do than the Atlanta Falcons, 100%. And it's because of a game like yesterday. I learned a lot more about the Bucs in that win over the Carolina Panthers than I did the week before against the lowly New York Giants. I mean, when you can win a game, when you don't have your A game, when you don't have your fastball, and you have to carve it up and you have to find ways to come out on top. I mean, no bigger reason than a guy like Anthony Nelson. I mean, you look at a guy, Matt, who just had a baby on Friday, comes in, he's one of the unsung heroes of this team, but Matt, he's a guy that he's only going to play a percentage of snaps. You know, he's a rotational pass rusher, but whether it's a late sack or a late fumble recovery or a late forced fumble, he has a knack for making plays like this.
I was saying that yesterday. You know, Todd Bowles calls him Steady Eddie, and he is Steady Eddie. And I don't know what it is in the air whenever Anthony Nelson comes into a game. Good things just happen. Like positivity follows Anthony Nelson one way or another. Sometimes it's just as simple as, you know, the offensive lineman screwed up his blocking assignment and Anthony Nelson's a free runner and he gets to the quarterback, but screw it. It still counts as a sack or a big play or whatever you want it to be. But that was all heart and hustle by Anthony Nelson, you know, on that strip sack of Chuba Hubbard. Of course, Yaya Diaby is the one that picked it up. And I don't know how you felt, but I thought Yaya was a little too nonchalant trying to go after the football when, like, your season is on the line. But he got it anyway, so that's a story for another day. And Anthony Nelson played more in this game because, remember, they didn't have Joe Tryon-Shoyinka. He did not play with an ankle injury. I'm curious if JTS was available for the game. Is Anthony Nelson even in that moment? Does JTS make the same play? And I'm not here to compare JTS and Anthony Nelson, but just, man, what a great play. That might be the play of the season for the Buccaneers up until this point, because if they lose that game to Carolina, sure, they still have a chance to get into the postseason. You still have a chance maybe to catch the Atlanta Falcons, but that would have been close to a dagger to Todd Bowles in his coaching career. But Anthony Nelson makes the big play, and here we are talking about a Bucs win.
Yeah, you got to keep your foot down on the gas pedal, and you have an opportunity to win the game like you did yesterday. Yeah, I'm with you. And on the Yaya play, it seemed like he was caught in between of like, I know the right thing is to fall on the football, but I think I have some space to pick up the ball. That was a guy that in his head, you could tell was definitely trying to rationalize. And Bryce Young really didn't dive in for that football. I mean, it's kind of making you remember of Cam Newton. You know, pull the Cam Newton there. You know, Baker Mayfield ain't doing that. You know, Baker Mayfield is going to do whatever it takes. He's going to dive even to his own, even to, you know, going against what's better for his body. How nervous were you yesterday when you saw him leave the game? Because anytime you see a quarterback stay down for as long as he did, it's very rare that you're going to see him come back. The news looked okay because it was just somebody stepped on his foot there. But, man, I know I was worried when they started panning the camera to Kyle Trask, and it looked like it was going to be Trask's season.
Yeah, by the way, Baker Mayfield would have ripped off his shoulder to extend his arm to get the fumble before he let the other team get the fumble. But, yeah, it was very scary when it came to Baker's injury, because as soon as he got tackled, he immediately – at first I thought he was going for his knee, but clearly it was more of an ankle thing. When you see any player at any position grab like a lower body situation, whether it's a knee or an ankle, you're thinking, oh, my God, like torn ACL, torn MCL, like whatever the case may be. I mean, Christian McCaffrey yesterday just – slid down right away, and you're immediately thinking the worst in that Bills 49ers game. And then Kyle Trask comes in, and I'm thinking, all right, well, yeah, Baker's done for the game, hopefully not done for the season, because that means it's the end of the Bucs season. And lo and behold, Baker's just right on the sideline, right again, ready to get back in. Wasn't a great first play back in when he threw the interception, but I mean, this is what this Bucs team is. They embody the heart, the soul, the mentality that Baker Mayfield has. I mean, he wants to win more than like Bucs fans want the Bucs to win. He just, it's an old school mentality a little bit. It's certainly gritty because he didn't have things going his way yesterday, but then still found a way to tie it up at the end in the fourth quarter. I mean, how do you not love watching Baker Mayfield play? I know you don't love the interceptions and things like that, but the heart and the hustle, just not everybody has that, and you got to respect it.
No, 100%. He's a guy that you love cheering for, because, you know, in a sport where sometimes I think guys look at it, and unfortunately we have examples, right? We just saw the Devin White thing, right? And these guys that are getting paid millions of dollars and a lack of effort and getting called out, like, you never, ever, ever have to question that with Baker Mayfield. And it's one thing when a guy does that, but it's another thing when you can tell there's tangible evidence that it rubs off on his teammates. And you listen to the way that they speak about each other, and going back to the Anthony Nelson thing, and you watch the video that the Buccaneers put out on their social media of Anthony Nelson coming into the locker room and how excited Levante David and Tristan Wirfs and this whole team was for him. That is the sign of a great team. And that's a sign of a team that has bonds, team that is together, because you see this in any aspect of life. And I saw it, recently with what happened to me in my profession. When other people show an outpouring of emotion towards you, whether it's happiness, whether it's compassion, it shows you kind of like what your character is through other people. So for everybody to be, they weren't just excited that they won the game. They were excited that Anthony Nelson was the guy that did that. So that speaks volumes of this Tampa Bay Buccaneers team. And as much as we look at Baker Mayfield as the guy that kind of does that, I think Todd Bowles deserves a lot of credit for that. And it's an intangible thing. You only see it sometimes in behind the scenes type videos, but I know a lot of people want to, and you mentioned it too, some people were going to be calling for Todd Bowles' job, or, they're always going to throw him to the wolves when things go bad. But what are some of the things that Todd Bowles does in a positive way that doesn't get enough credit when it comes from the fan base?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because I think one of the main things that Bucs fans get annoyed with when it comes to Todd Bowles is seeing his stoic nature on the sideline. He's not really like freaking out about anything or really showing too many emotions. And Todd has explained it, sometimes off camera, sometimes on camera, but he's explained it as, football is a high stakes game. There's a lot of emotions running high. We see crazy penalties happen. We see, you look at college football, the flag planting, and everybody's, more chaotic after the game than in the game itself. But Bowles keeps that stoic manner, or that calm manner, I should say, because he doesn't want to show any panic, because people might think if your head coach is panicking, well, then the rest of the team is going to panic. Right. I just think behind the scenes, he finds a way really to, tap into his players and see what works for them, what doesn't work for them. I know Devin White's not here anymore, but Devin White would talk about Todd Bowles like he's a father figure. I know he's got a great relationship with Levante David. I still go back to Will Golston early on when Todd Bowles was here, and Will Golston was like, Todd Bowles is a guy that you want to run through a brick wall through for. And so, he's got the guys' backs on defense. But I think Todd's kind of, I don't want to say carefree, but like he'll talk a lot of smack in practice. He's very sarcastic. I think his way to kind of like show that you can humanize things in football has been very important for him, because he had the bad losing streak last season. You had a 4-game losing streak this year. And as we've seen around the league, other teams would start pointing fingers. Other teams would start kind of breaking down, saying this season is done. But that hasn't happened with the Bucs 2 years in a row. And Todd Bowles deserves that credit. If you want to scrutinize his timeout usage, certain things on the defense that, have been used or haven't been called, that's fine. But he hasn't lost the locker room when I think a lot of other situations the locker room would have been lost. And he forms special relationships with his players that isn't seen on camera, but it's helped the Bucs win.
Bucky Irving was fantastic in this game against the Carolina Panthers. And when you look at like yards from scrimmage and what he's been able to do this year, and you're putting him up there with guys like Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry, and you're going, damn, man, this isn't just a good year for a rookie. This is a really good year for any type of running back. Just to see that kid grow, what's his ceiling when it comes to his role with this Tampa Bay Buccaneers and kind of in the hierarchy when it comes to running back and backs in the NFL?
I think Bucky Irving can be a star. Now, is he going to be like, a top 3 running back in the league? I don't necessarily know. But, there are only a couple of running backs in this league currently where when they have the football, I'm just thinking, wow, something special is going to happen, or they're going to be off to the races. And right now, I think it's Saquon. I think it's Derrick Henry, obviously, when he has the ball. I would say it's a healthy Christian McCaffrey when he's all set, but that hasn't been the case this year. Bucky, I can't put in that category just yet. And I don't know if he has the full breakaway speed. He gets to the 3rd and 4th level, but he doesn't always break it for touchdowns. But I get a little bit of that feeling when I watch Bucky Irving. He just hits the hole right away. He makes everybody miss, and he's always going forward. He never gets tackled backwards. He always gets tackled forward. So if it's a 4th and inches, he's going to get it because he always gets tackled forward. He has excellent vision. I actually think Sean Tucker has the best vision on this team, but Bucky Irving does a great job of just finding the hole, hitting it right away. He's great as a receiver as well, as we've seen the past couple of weeks. I think the sky is the limit for Bucky Irving, and I think it's great that the Bucs committed this week to Bucky Irving is our main rusher. He had 25 attempts. It clearly paid off with 152 yards and that touchdown. Just keep feeding Bucky, and that doesn't mean that Rachaad White isn't important to this team. He just has a different role. So I think Bucky Irving really can be a star.
And Rachaad White showed in overtime that big run right before the game-winning kick from Chase McLaughlin. And it's a good job by Liam Cohen. And I still think Liam Cohen has room to grow as well. Some of his play calls in the red zone, I think, leaves a little bit to be desired. Not an easy – I mean, he said it himself before week 1. 3 running back system is not an easy thing to handle because you have to try to keep what do you do? One drive. And sometimes you only call one play. How can you tell how good a guy is if he's only running the ball one time and you threw it the other 2 or 3 times? So I understand that with Liam Cohen, but I'm excited about the prospect of this team moving forward because there's a good vibe about them. I feel like they're looking around and they're playing, when they do well, they're playing complementary football, defensively, offensively, special teams outside of, I don't know what Trenton Gill was doing, but Chase McLaughlin makes the big kicks when he has to. I know it was a tough miss in overtime, but that was a huge kick at the end of regulation. Every little bit, like every single player played their part in that victory over the Carolina Panthers. Is there an unsung hero or one storyline that people are kind of missing when it comes to that win over Carolina?
Unsung hero. I mean, I think everyone knows Tristan Wirfs, but him battling and being able to play, I think was super important. I think the offensive line, really the way that they blocked is a story in of itself, because in my opinion, and I do tend to sway more positive than negative in certain situations. Part of me, though, looking at this game, thinks that there were a couple of heroes that saved the day. I think it was Bucky Irving, obviously. It was Anthony Nelson, obviously. Mike Evans and the Bucs offensive line. I think those guys really saved the day for the Bucs, and everyone else was kind of pedestrian. So I look at the offensive line, just the overall turnaround of a group that was dead last for 2 years in a row running the football. And now the running game is the strength of this offense. I mean, how could it not be when the receivers, you get Mike Evans, who balled out, and loved what I saw from Mike. But outside of that, it's very pedestrian contributions from the rest of the group, where the offensive line is anchoring this team. Of course, Bucky Irving, of course, Rachaad White as well. But Tristan Wirfs battling through that knee injury, coming back, not missing too much time, and playing really well. I think, obviously, he's not unsung. Everybody knows Tristan Wirfs. But that was one of the storylines that, for me, caught my attention.
I like some of the bubble screens for Sterling Shepard, and I think the catch Sterling Shepard made right before the game-tying field goal was one of those under-the-radar things. Is Sterling Shepard going to be replacing Chris Godwin? No. But there's going to be certain plays where his veteran guile kind of pays off, and I think we saw that a little bit against Carolina. I know there's going to be some frustrating plays as well, but I think he's kind of proven his worth a little bit in big-time situations for this team. Did you see Survivor Series?
I watched the main event. I only saw the main event.
All right, so I'm bringing you in. I'm going to bring in Eddie Encina in here with us. I'm bringing
What's
in
up,
Ed,
Eddie?
Big Ed, because he's feeling oozy. So bringing in, this is a special Survivor Series edition at the end of Matt's appearance here in the beginning of Ed's. Ed, what's going on, buddy? How are you?
What's going on, fellas? Good to see you, Matty.
It's you guys feeling oozy today.
To see you too, man.
It's actually funny because I haven't worn this sweatshirt. I don't know how long because it hadn't been cold enough. So I knew I was coming on with you, so I was like, I should rock the OG bloodline from a couple years ago.
Yeet all day, buddy. All right, we'll start with you, Ed. Then for the main event. What did you think of the main event? Bloodline, the OG Bloodline goes over Bloodline 2.0. What were some of the big things that stood out to you about that main event?
So, it's all about kind of the buildup, right, with these things. And, I honestly was over the course of this, I kind of got a little bit tired of some of the buildup because I just kind of got tired of, Solo and the new Bloodline just kind of kicking Roman's ass all the time. So the John Heyman part of the Paul Heyman part of this, not John Heyman.
Look at the baseball guy.
Yeah, I mean, baseball.
Nothing to do with this. But the Paul Heyman part of it's always just, we talk about this all the time, Jay, is like that dynamic and what he brings and everything like that, that just made it, right? And then you bring in CM Punk and everything like that. And I was wondering where they were going to go with it until then. And obviously it made for a really good main event at Survivor Series. I thought that, I was actually watching it live while covering the game the other day on my phone. So I had the sound down, so I couldn't hear the play-by-play. I actually not till I went back home and watched it on a replay. But yeah, I thought it was cool. I think that, and also the other thing is, and this is one thing that they've been so good at recently, is, that you can kind of see the next level of the storyline play out, right? And it can go in so many different directions. And I was honestly wondering that going in is, how much more different ways can they take this now? Because they've gone so long, and I know we all remember that press conference where what they said they were like in the third inning, right? Of it. And now you look at it like, you can really believe that there's still some meat on this bone beyond just like these two factions clashing. But like, I'm a big OG Bloodline guy. I'm a big part of Yeet Nation. So, I mean, I love it. I roll with it. I like what I see, and I thought it was pretty cool the other night. And also to remember that Jey Uso and Sami Zayn are now 3-0,
right,
in Survivor Series 5-on-5. So.
Yeah, I mean, insane. Matt, what'd you think of the main event?
Yeah, overall, I liked it. And my wrestling fandom, I think, is kind of different than most. Like, I'd rather watch a sick promo where two guys are like dissing each other the whole time, just as much as like a really good match. And I kind of like the hardcore, bring out the tables and stuff like that. I enjoy that as much as just like you, me, WrestleMania, middle of the ring, like one-on-one. So I always like all the chicanery that comes with it.
Right.
At first, I felt bad for Jimmy a little bit because, like, Sammy comes out and it's a huge roar, and he's Canadian, they're in Canada, I get it. And then Jimmy comes out, and everyone's just kind of like, okay, like whatever. So I was happy that Jimmy got his moment later on when he jumped off the cell.
I thought,
like,
listen, I'm going to interject real quick. I totally agree with you. I thought he was the low-key all-star of that match because he did a Jeff Hardy Whisper in the Wind off the top of the rope.
Yes, he did.
He did the splash off the top, but looked good. All of the things that he did, I thought it was probably his best in-ring performance than I think I've ever seen. Their WrestleMania match wasn't great. They got their time cut. It didn't look fantastic. And they both knew that. And good thing that they were able to come out the next night and do all they had to do during the big time match with Cody and Roman. But I thought that was the best performance I've ever seen from Jimmy Uso in the ring. But I'm with you, Matt. And especially after it was a respectful like applause and entrance because him interjecting the storyline, but he isn't near the level of a Jey Uso because Jey Uso is really become its own thing with the Yeet, and he came out last. Jey Uso came out last, like after CM Punk, after Roman Reigns, Jey Uso came out last, and nobody batted an eye. They were like, hey, if anything, you were just like, that has shown how Jey has come up through this entire storyline, and I hope that what we saw Saturday is going to help Jimmy, because if you listen or you watch anything, Jimmy's like the comedian of the group. Like he is the guy that keeps everybody together, like in the family. He's hilarious. And if we can see a little bit more of that as a babyface on TV, I think you can start getting him up to that main event level like we saw from his brother Jey.
Yeah, like even his entrance music, it doesn't pop the way that like everyone else in the bloodline does. So I mean, it's got to be tough a little bit. Like, it's your twin brother, and I'm sure there's some, like, I'm very happy for Jey, but it's clearly, like, Jey is a star, and Jimmy's kind of still, like, the guy that walks out with Roman as Roman's, maybe not lackey at this point because he's a good guy. But the match, so I was happy for Jimmy. The match itself, I thought was good. I don't think it's going to land in history as, like, one of the greatest matches in Bloodline history. It was good for what it was. And I think part of it is everybody was like expecting a swerve or a big turn or The Rock's going to come out. And it's almost like the swerve and the surprise was that there wasn't a swerve and a surprise. That it was just a straight up match. The good guys beat the bad guys, or however you want to view each side of it. And because there wasn't a swerve, like that was almost the surprise in of itself. I will say at the end when it was just like Solo and his Denzel Washington moment in Training Day being like, all right, like let's get this over with. I did think for a second, the way that they all circled, that Solo was going to like nod at one of the guys and then they were going to start beating up Roman, but that didn't happen. And then CM Punk with the favor. What's the favor? What's it going to be? Are they going to explain it next show? Is it going to be a thing down the road where we're going to go, oh yeah, remember that time? But overall, it was fun. I enjoyed it. I didn't think it was like out of this park fantastic, but we were entertained. And, you know, that's what the E stands for, right?
You got that right. And I want to piggyback on what you just said. I was really hoping The Rock was going to be there last night or Saturday. That didn't happen, so it was a little bit of a letdown. I thought it was a little weird that Seth Rollins wasn't involved at all because, they were teasing that. No Cody and KO on the show was kind of weird. Like, you don't have your world champion. I get,
you got to put on a show for Long Island.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but it was just there was something missing. I thought it was really good. I wouldn't say it was. I thought it was really good, bordering on great, but it wasn't fantastic. I'm with you, Matt. It wasn't like mind blowing. I thought there was one point where Sammy might have turned on the OG bloodline. There was a moment where he was in the middle of the one ring, and I go, "Oh no, is Sammy going to turn on these guys?" That didn't happen. I did like that there was a official, like a handshake between CM Punk and Roman Reigns, because just show me some kind of mutual respect and move on. Like, eventually, like, the hard ass act. Like, I like that he stopped CM Punk from going out into the, leaving the cage. He let Sammy go, call him back to what he did last year. And then CM Punk kind of shouldering Roman as he goes to the ring as the fourth guy. But once you keep doing that and then there's no blow off, it's like, all right, you're on the same side, shake hands and move on. And I think that's what we saw. I don't think that the favor is going to be with the bloodline. I think it's going to be outside the bloodline. Maybe it's a world title shot against Gunther or somebody like that, where Paul Heyman will pull the strings. I don't think that CM Punk needs to be involved with the bloodline storyline anymore. That's the reason why I'm glad Cody's out of it. That you still got other family members that just got signed to the WWE that we haven't seen yet. And The Rock is still waiting as the final boss. So, Matt, I'll ask you this before we let you go. What do you think is the next step in the bloodline? And then Ed, I'll ask you that same thing before we talk some Lightning hockey.
Oh, that's a good question. I get a little hazy with the details because I don't watch like every single week. I try to, but I mean, have we gotten just Roman versus Solo, like just one-on-one?
I don't think so. Right, Ed?
Not really. No. I mean, it comes down to Ulafala now, right? I mean,
the next,
basically, right?
Yeah, so I think that's got to be the next one. But when do you do it? Because you're not going to do it at WrestleMania if you got Roman versus Rock. So, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, yes, maybe that's Saturday night main event level there. What about you, Ed? What do you think?
I don't know. I think, like you guys both pointed out really well, is like the Jimmy part of this is really, really interesting. And I think that, the one thing that kind of came full circle with all this is, as we mentioned here, is that like these guys all needed each other at one point, right? And now they've kind of agreed, even though they really kind of have all gone out on their own to a certain degree, or turn their backs on each other to a certain degree, that they can come together. So, I'm just looking forward to a bunch of like even some singles matches with some of these guys where we get a bunch of interferences and a whole bunch of crap goes on that leads to different plot lines. But I do agree that like the Jimmy aspect of it, and like you said, he is the funny dude. If you ever see his social and anything that he puts up, like he is really like the big personality of that group. And hopefully, that we get to see some of that with this next, inning or layer of that. So, sorry, my voice, I've been drinking tea. I sound like Triple H here, but
it's time to play the game.
Anyway, go ahead.
I love it, man. All right, Matt, I appreciate you, brother. Thank you so much for talking some Buccaneer football and some wrestling as well. Matty4_Matera. Check out the guys at Pewter Report, pewterreport.com. Appreciate you, brother. Talk to you again soon.
Yeah, anytime. Thanks for having me on. Ed, good to see you. Hope you're doing well. And talk to you guys soon.
Good to see you,
buddy. Thanks, Matt.